Oh,
It's the after
it's
show.
the after show. That was good. Of course, I always love when we talk about keep on choose the choice to keep on choosing. There's so much more underneath that versus, what we just scratch the surface because, I mean, everything about choices is our life.
Yeah. I love this topic because it's at the heart of what my resistance was to growing up and around family and an environment where I felt like people lived with the context of I don't have a choice. Like, and I think that just for me feels the most present. If I had to describe my childhood growing up and like the attitude of my parents, it would feel like I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice about my happiness. I don't have a choice about my marriage. I don't have a choice about where I live. I don't have a choice about how I spend my time. Like, that's the energy. And it came out in these really subtle messages growing up. And I think I took that on, right? As a teenager and a young adult, I took that on. That's what I knew. But it made me crazy. It made me crazy. And I think the first time that I did one of these experiential workshops, and it wasn't quite in this way that they said it, but it started tapping into this sort of victim, chooser, paradigm that I started to see, and of course I was quite judgmental about my parents about this for a long time. Like, you guys were really victims, oh, you made me feel victimized. And I took on that mentality, and it was what it was. And it was time at that moment to realize I had a choice about that. It wasn't sort of my destiny to carry on a context that perhaps, they just didn't know any better. Whether they did or not, that's what they chose, right? That's what they were
Right.
doing. And for me, I think now it's been, 25 plus years where I, of course, am human and I go in and out. Sometimes I will feel like a victim in a situation for a short period of time. What I know is that I have this always in the background, since then, of like, it is a choice how I'm going to see the situation. Sometimes I see it super quickly, and
Right.
sometimes it may take me some weeks or even months in a particular situation. Not so much months anymore, but it used to, right?
Right. Right. Now sometimes minutes.
Now
Seconds.
seconds even.
Right. Exactly. And that's the growth of choosing. Right? That's the growth. Nothing's wrong. I love how we keep going back, and there was such relief. I remember when Ron said that in the very first, I think, weekend at USM. Nothing's wrong and nothing's right. We try to make it right and wrong choices. We try to make and I still do that, choices right or wrong. But really, nothing's wrong and nothing's right. Everything is perfect. Everything and everyone is in your life, in this moment, in this time, in this space, in this place, in this context, content, lettuce bowl, in that big bowl called your life. Everyone is there to mirror something back beautifully for you, to take from it, to heal from it, to absorb, and to be loved, not to be loved. And then you get to choose how you want to even perceive it all. Like, we have the choice that we can even perceive how we're being dealt these cards called our life, right? Like, I think that's the big takeaway from this podcast is we even have the choice to choose how we view it.
That's absolutely. I keep thinking back, the most present example that I've seen around this that really highlights where we really are at choice is restorative justice. Like, this idea when a harm has been done to someone, that the actor who committed that harm goes into a process to acknowledge and apologize and take responsibility for the harm they caused, and the person upon whom the harm occurred is willing to participate in that process, to receive that, and also to forgive, and also to own, even when they have been victimized in a situation, to own that they have choice in how they experience that. And I mean, when I have heard stories, I mean, and there's like more and more stories about this. We're not just talking about somebody steals from you and, or defames you, or I don't know, these kinds of harms, but when someone's murdered your child, when someone's, I mean, done something like that, and the mother of the child who was murdered can sit down with the person who murdered her child and have resolution and have compassion and empathy. And I mean, to me, what greater example of the ability to choose one's response can we have than that? I mean, if a mother can forgive the person who murdered her child, or the Holocaust survivor, had choice during his time in a concentration camp about how he experienced that, or Nelson Mandela could still show love or feel love in his heart for the people that imprisoned him for decades. I mean, if we have examples like that, like, what else, what more do we need then, right? Just,
Right.
these are huge reminders and actions of our ability to choose. I just don't know how we can argue with that.
Right. And we won't.
We won't.
We won't.
We
That's for
won't like
sure.
it sometimes. I'm not the person, I will be the first person to say, there are certain situations that are super easy for me to take total responsibility and accept and embrace and choose. And then there's others where it takes me time, right? And those that
Right.
take me time, they're simply the ones where I think there's more learning, more growth, right? Those are the places where I start to feel I'm out of my comfort zone, whereas the other ones are like easy. And we all have those, right?
Right. I mean, and we also, I want to say, we also have the great ability and the grace of the ability to change our choice and change our choosing, right? Like we can always change our choices in the blink of an eye, right? We may say, no, I did this because, here's where I was at the time, and that may have been just yesterday. And today I woke up, I got a lot of new cells, I got a new choice. Like we can always change in the blink of an eye our choosing. And that is because of a lot of grace. That's because of a lot of freedom, right? In our own way of being within here. Like just give ourselves the freedom to be where we are in the moment of ourselves, and to continually assess within our own selves, is this for my best and highest ability? And I think that's beautifully where the pause comes in that prayerful moment, in that grace moment, in that silent moment, in that assessing moment, in that moment that can bring such clarity before you respond or react or choose. That is exactly what you did yesterday. You don't have to keep doing today. You may want to, you may not want to. And then we can have so much compassion for ourselves, for the choices we wish we would have made, the choices we wish we wouldn't have made. I think there's some suffering around the choices we wish we would have made, just as much as there are around the choices we wish we wouldn't have made, right? So I think that along with that, just because this is the experience called life, and there comes a point. I doubt there's listeners here that are not owners of their own life. There may be, but I doubt anybody gets this far in our podcast that aren't owning their own experience to great degrees. Let's say that, because you would have turned us off a long time ago, right? So anyway, I think it's a great podcast, and there's just so much more there. I mean, we could do a whole series on choice, right? Because it's exactly our moment to moment life, because we're choosing everything.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I know for me, I've had to be most mindful about is when you started talking in the podcast about how we have so many choices and like how do we even make the choices, or you know, how do we even move from unconscious choosing to conscious choosing with so many choices, and how do we even get to know what feels correct for us? I think going to USM and clarifying in that context, in that learning environment, 1, 2, 5, 10 sort of guiding principles, right? Why do we have the 10 commandments? I think because that was sort of like the guiding principles for people at the time who, you know, wanted to follow God in that way. Why do we have the Bible or the Quran or other texts like these guiding principles? I think part of why so many of us are so lost and sort of choosing but not really wanting to own it or feeling like we can own it or whatever is because we don't have our set. So whether it's our core values, whether it's just a couple of like ideas to live by, whatever it is, I think that's probably maybe another podcast to do, is like getting to those for each of us individually, because I knew that I had certain core values, but I wasn't super conscious of them, I think, before doing the master's in spiritual psychology. And then afterwards, the tenets from spiritual psychology, like life is for learning, for example, or I'm a soul having a human experience, a dozen of those or so have been guiding factors for me. And then I've added my own, and I'm really clear about what my core values are. When I have this again is like the context. This is my personal rule book that I choose to live, my personal set of principles. And then how I make choices then is within this context, as opposed to anything is possible, any amount of time, which for me just makes me crazy if I think about it from that perspective.
I think that's a great podcast in the sense of those tenets and that personal value. I mean, because you and I worked on this just a couple of weeks ago, like a month ago or whatever, and they're changing, right? Like they could change, and some will stay the same, right, throughout. Like we still have the 10 Commandments, so I think that's a great podcast on that. So we'll definitely put that down. All right, my dear. And if you want to find us, www.takeashiftnow.com. You can find out all about us or reach us on our website. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that stuff. Right, my love?
Fun.
All right.
Thank
Until
you.
next time, I love you.
Till next time.